Previously, we saw Harper and Elena fall in love amidst the chaos of a family betrayal. Now, with the discovery of an unexpected pregnancy, they must face reality and fight for the love they have built. We went back to bed in silence, but the atmosphere in the room had changed drastically, as if gravity had increased and the air was denser around us. Elena sat up against the headboard, pulling the duvet up to her chin in a defensive gesture, eyes fixed on an invisible point on the wall, lost in a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. I sat beside her, respecting her space, but keeping my body close enough to emanate heat, watching the internal storm sweeping her face. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She thought that positive test was the end point of our brief love story, the release letter that would allow me to run back to my uncomplicated life. Her fragility hurt me more than the news itself, for it revealed how accustomed she was to being discarded or seen as a problem to be solved. She turned her face to me slowly, and the question that fell from her lips was a broken whisper, charged with an anticipated sadness that almost broke my heart. She asked if I wanted her to leave, if I needed time to think, or if I felt disgusted by the bizarre situation we found ourselves in. Those words sounded absurd to my ears, offensive even, given the immensity of what I felt for her. I held her hands, which were icy and trembling, and brought them to my lips, kissing each finger with deliberate devotion, trying to convey through touch the certainty that words might not reach. I told her, with the firmest voice I could find, that the only place she should be was there, with me. I explained that biology was just a technical detail, a circumstance of the past that had no power over our present or our future. I looked deep into her eyes and said I didn't see that baby as an extension of my brother, or as a family burden I would be forced to carry due to kinship. I saw that child as part of her, and if I loved every piece of her, I would also love what grew in her womb. It was a declaration of possession and partnership. I wasn't offering to be the cool aunt who visits on weekends. I was applying to be in the daily trench beside her. Elena started crying again, but this time it was a different cry, a release of relief from someone who held their breath for too long and can finally let the air out. She let go of the duvet and threw herself into my arms, hiding her face in my neck, wetting my skin with hot tears washing away the fear. I wrapped her in my strong arms, rocking her gently as if lulling both of us, feeling the tension leave her back muscles. I whispered promises against her hair, guaranteeing she would never be alone on that journey, that I would be her shield against the world and against any judgment. We lay down again, facing each other, creating a cocoon of intimacy where the outside world wasn't allowed to enter. I placed my large, warm hand over her belly, still flat and soft, in a gesture of recognition and full acceptance of the new reality. Elena covered my hand with hers, her fingers interlacing with mine, and smiled shyly, a small but genuine smile that illuminated the room's gloom. In that moment, the biological father became an irrelevant figure, a mere distant genetic donor. The real family was the two of us there in that bed. We started talking about the immediate future, not with panic, but with affectionate pragmatism that surprised me. We decided she would live with me, that we would turn the office into a nursery, and that we would face any storm coming from my family together. I talked about painting walls and buying cribs, and with every plan I outlined, I saw her shoulders relax more, confidence returning to her gaze. I was assuming a role I never imagined desiring, but which now seemed the most natural and correct thing in my life, being the partner, the protector, and the mother alongside her. The morning advanced lazily, and the news that could have been an atomic bomb ended up becoming the cement that solidified our union definitively. We made love with a new tenderness, slow and reverent, celebrating not just pleasure, but the silent commitment we had sealed without the need for papers or ceremonies. I kissed every inch of her body, lingering especially on her womb, claiming that territory as ours, not his. Elena responded with absolute surrender, her touches on me charged with gratitude and a love overflowing from her pores. When we got up to face the day, we were no longer the same women who entered that room a week before. There was a new strength in Elena, a posture of someone who knows she has solid backup, and I felt invincible, ready to fight the whole world if necessary to ensure her peace. The Hayden problem was downgraded to a footnote, a bureaucratic issue to be resolved with coldness and distance when the time came. What mattered, the only thing that really mattered, was that we were together, and that, in some twisted, mysterious way, life had given us a gift. I made her tea, attending to every detail with maternal zeal that now extended to her and the baby, feeling strangely happy. Elena sat at the kitchen table, sunlight illuminating her face, and for the first time in a long while, I saw real hope in her eyes. She stroked her own belly and looked at me smiling, and I knew we had won the first battle against fear. The pregnancy wasn't the end of our freedom. It was the beginning of our family, designed and built by our own rules. It was decided we wouldn't tell anyone for now, that we would keep that secret as our private treasure until we felt ready. That conspiracy united us even more, creating a world where only our truth and our love existed. I looked at her and felt a wave of love so strong I almost lost my breath. Absolute certainty that I was born to find her and love her. And so, holding hands over the breakfast table, we started the first day of the rest of our lives. We scheduled the meeting with Hayden at an impersonal coffee shop downtown, neutral ground where he wouldn't have the advantage of family territory, and neither would we allow him to invade our private sanctuary. Elena and I arrived together, holding hands, a united and unbreakable front, wearing an invisible armor of complicity we had forged in the last few hours. When we entered, I saw my brother sitting in the back, checking his watch impatiently, still wearing the arrogance of someone who believes he's the protagonist of every story. However, upon seeing us walking toward him, his expression faltered, transforming into a mask of genuine confusion. It wasn't common to see the twin sister and the ex-fiancé together, much less with that aura of serene intimacy we emanated, as if sharing a secret the whole world didn't know. We sat opposite him without ceremony, refusing the menu the waiter offered, for that meeting wasn't social. It was purely administrative. Hayden tried to start small talk, asking where I'd been and why I wasn't answering the phone, but I cut him off with a sharp hand gesture. My voice, when it came out, didn't have the hesitation of the younger sister, but the firmness of a matriarch dictating the rules of the game. I told him we weren't there to discuss my schedule or his ego crises, but to communicate irrevocable facts that would change our family dynamic forever. Elena remained silent by my side, not out of weakness, but because we had agreed I would be the spokesperson for that new reality, sparing her unnecessary emotional wear. I dropped the first bombshell with the coldness of someone reading a technical report. Elena was pregnant. I watched Hayden's face go through a spectrum of colors, from the pallor of shock to the red of indignation, as he tried to process the information that his betrayal had left a biological legacy. Before he could open his mouth to question paternity or make any stupid comment, I launched the second part of the revelation, the one that really mattered. I said, staring into his eyes, that Elena and I were together, not as friends, but as partners, and that we were going to raise that child as a family of two mothers. The silence that settled at the table was heavy, broken only by the clinking of cups around us, while my brother's brain tried to connect the dots of that absurd image for him. He looked from me to Elena, looking for some sign that this was a bad joke or elaborate revenge, but found only absolute serenity in her eyes and fierce determination in mine. He tried to stammer something about emotional incest or madness, but his words died in his throat before our unshakable posture. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he had lost control of the narrative and had no power over the two of us. I put the cards on the table with brutal clarity, establishing the limits of his future participation. He would be the biological father, yes, and would have his legal rights and duties, including the financial support the child deserved, but the role of daily family belonged to us. There would be no room for drama, scenes of jealousy, or attempts to rekindle a past he himself destroyed. If he wanted to be part of his son's life, he would have to accept our relationship and respect us as the main unit of care and affection for that child. It was take it or leave it. The door was open for him to be a decent father or a stranger who pays child support. The choice was entirely his. Hayden leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking smaller and more insignificant, like a deposed king realizing his castle was taken without him even noticing the invasion. He looked at Elena one last time, perhaps looking for the submissive woman he knew, but saw only a strong woman holding his sister's hand with affection and possession. His defeat was silent and pathetic. He nodded slowly, murmuring that he would shoulder the responsibilities and needed time to digest it all. There was no shouting, no scandal. The importance he thought he had in our lives evaporated right there, reduced to signatures on checks and fortnightly visits arranged by text message. We got up from the table before his coffee even arrived, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his mediocrity. As we left that place, I felt a gigantic weight lifting off my shoulders, a feeling of freedom that made me want to laugh out loud in the middle of the street. Hayden was now just a detail, a distant satellite orbiting our planet. I squeezed Elena's hand, and she looked at me with pride, eyes shining with the certainty that I would keep my promise to protect her. We had beaten the bureaucracy of the past. Now, we were free to build our future, topic by topic, day after day. The following months unfolded like a slow-motion movie, where every frame was filled with the fascinating discovery of the changes occurring in Elena's body. Spring came and went, giving way to a stifling summer, but inside our apartment, we lived in our own time zone, marked not by the clock, but by the constant growth of that life we shared. I watched, mesmerized, the transformation of my girlfriend, seeing her habitual thinness give way to soft, full curves, as if nature were sculpting a new version of her before my eyes. Her belly, previously imperceptible, began to show, round and firm, altering her center of gravity and the way she moved through the house. I found myself watching her for hours, enchanted by the way she instinctively protected her womb with her hands, a gesture of maternal love born long before the baby breathed its first air. My role as protector gained new dimensions, making me a kind of dedicated guardian of her every physical and emotional need. I became an expert in massaging swollen feet at the end of the day, using almond and lavender oils to relieve the weight she carried with such bravery. Sitting on the living room floor with her feet in my lap became our sacred nightly ritual, a moment of connection, where my large hands tried to drain all the tiredness from her delicate body. Elena would close her eyes and sigh, murmuring that I had magic hands, and that simple compliment was worth more to me than any professional award I could receive. I loved feeling her skin under my fingers, the soft, warm texture that seemed to radiate its own light, typical of pregnancy. Midnight cravings became comic and sweet adventures, breaking the monotony of sleepless nights caused by the discomfort of a big belly. I remember going out at 3 a.m., wearing a coat over pajamas, to hunt for pistachio ice cream or a specific brand of chocolate she swore was the only edible one in the world. I returned victorious, like a hunter bringing the catch, and we laughed together in the kitchen lit only by the refrigerator light, eating straight from the jar with tablespoons. These moments, which could be exhausting, were sources of joy for us, pieces of domestic happiness cementing our partnership unbreakably. Hayden sent child support religiously, but he wasn't there to see her smile smeared with chocolate. That privilege was exclusively mine. Intimacy between us didn't diminish with pregnancy. On the contrary, it deepened and changed tone, gaining reverent tenderness and a new sensuality. Making love became an act of creativity and extreme care, where we sought positions comfortable for her and safe for the baby. I treated her as if she were made of blown glass, kissing every new stretch mark appearing on her hips as if they were lines on a sacred treasure map. Elena, who initially feared I would lose interest because of bodily changes, bloomed under my gaze of constant adoration. I told her every day how sexy she was, how motherhood gave her an aura of a fertility goddess, and I saw her confidence shine back at me. There were hard days, of course, when hormones turned her emotions into an unpredictable roller coaster of crying and irritation without apparent reason. In those moments, I was the safe harbor, the unshakable German rock where she could anchor her drifting boat until the storm passed. I hugged her in silence, letting her wet my shirt with tears of frustration, understanding she wasn't crying from sadness, but from the excess of everything she was feeling. I learned not to try to fix everything with words, but to offer presence, chamomile tea, and a broad shoulder where she could rest her heavy head. Our communication evolved beyond speech. A simple look from her told me if she needed space or a crushing hug. The stretch mark cream ritual became one of my favorite moments of the day, a liturgy of touch and affection we performed before sleeping. Elena lay on the bed, belly exposed, and I warmed the cream in my palms, before spreading it slowly over the stretched skin of her womb. I talked to the belly while my fingers drew soft circles, telling the baby how the day had been, and how much we both already loved him desperately. Elena laughed at my one-sided conversations, running her hand through my blonde hair, and I felt absolute peace invade the room. Certainty that this was the exact place where I should be in the universe. The first time I felt the baby kick was a milestone that changed my perception of reality forever. We were watching a movie on the sofa, my hand resting distractedly on her belly, when I felt a strong jolt against my palm, like a greeting coming from the inside. I froze, eyes wide with shock and emotion, and Elena laughed, covering my hand with hers so I could feel the next movement. It was a direct physical connection to that life we were helping form, a powerful reminder that there were 3 of us in that room, not just 2. I cried with emotion, absolutely shameless, feeling like the mother of that child just as much as the woman carrying him. We set up the nursery together, turning the old cold office into a cozy nest, painted in pastel tones and decorated with forest themes. I assembled the crib with my own hands, tightening every screw with excessive force, ensuring that structure was the safest place in the world for our son. Elena folded the tiny clothes and organized them in drawers by color and size, humming lullabies she learned from her grandmother. Seeing those small clothes, knitted shoes, and plush toys scattered around the house brought a sweet reality to our wait. The house smelled of baby powder and expectation, an aroma mixing with our usual perfume. Hayden became a spectral figure, someone who existed only in bank transfers and short messages, asking if everything was okay, to which I replied with politeness and brevity. He wasn't part of those Sunday afternoons assembling furniture, didn't hear the heartbeat on the ultrasound holding her hand, didn't wake up at dawn to calm her nightmares. His absence wasn't felt as a lack, but as relief, empty space we filled with double the love and dedication. Elena never mentioned his name with longing or regret. For her, the family was already complete there, in that apartment. As the due date approached, anxiety began to mix with excitement, an electric countdown keeping us on alert. We packed the hospital bag weeks in advance, checking the item list obsessively, laughing at our own first-time mom exaggeration. I drove the route to the hospital several times mentally and by car, timing it, ensuring nothing would go wrong on the big day. I wanted to control the uncontrollable, ensure Elena didn't suffer a second more than necessary. In the last days, with a huge, heavy belly, Elena could barely find a comfortable position to sleep, and I spent nights awake watching her restless sleep. I watched her turn from side to side, sighing with discomfort, and my heart clenched with love and solidarity. I helped her get up to go to the bathroom every hour, supporting her weight, being her legs when hers failed. There was raw beauty in that mutual dependence, final proof that our love wasn't just made of passion and kisses, but of service and sacrifice. On the last night before contractions began, we lay in the dark, hearing rain beat on the window, feeling we were on the edge of a wonderful precipice. Elena held my face in the dark and thanked me for turning the worst nightmare of her life into a real dream. I kissed her slowly, tasting tears of happiness, and promised the adventure was just beginning. We were ready, united and strong, prepared to welcome the third member of our little private revolution. Her water broke on a Tuesday dawn, silent and unexpected, soaking the sheets and marking the end of our long wait. There was no cinematic panic, just an exchange of looks charged with adrenaline and absolute certainty that the time had come. I took command with a calm that surprised me, helping Elena change between contractions, dressing her in comfortable clothes while whispering that everything would be okay. The ride to the maternity ward was done under electric tension. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other holding hers, which squeezed my fingers with massive strength with every wave of pain sweeping her body. The world outside slept, oblivious to the fact that, inside that car, the lives of two women were about to change irrevocably. The delivery room became our battlefield and our sanctuary. I didn't leave her side for a second, transforming into the doula, partner, and anchor she needed to navigate the ocean of labor pain. I wiped sweat from her forehead with cool towels, offered water in the intervals, and breathed with her, synchronizing our lungs so she wouldn't feel alone even in breathing. Elena looked at me with glazed eyes, seeking in me the strength she lacked, and I gave her everything I had, whispering words of courage and love directly into her ear, creating a bubble of intimacy amidst monitor beeps and medical team movement. Hayden was notified by text, a protocol fulfilled only to avoid future legal problems, and his reply was that he was on his way. But when he arrived, he stayed in the waiting room, respecting or fearing, the invisible barrier protecting that sacred moment belonging to us. He knew, deep down, he didn't have the right to be there holding her hand, that place had been earned by me in every sleepless night, every tended nausea, and every shared dream. His absence in the room wasn't a gap, but confirmation that the real family was the one sweating and fighting together on the hospital bed. The hours dragged, intense and exhausting, testing Elena's physical and emotional limits. There were moments she said she couldn't do it, that the pain was bigger than her, and I held her face between my hands, forcing her to look at me. I said with a choked voice that she was the strongest woman I knew, that she had survived worse pains in her soul, and that physical pain had a beautiful purpose. My faith in her was the fuel making her try one more time, push one more time, screaming my name as if I were her salvation. And in a way, I was, just as she was mine. The final moment was an explosion of chaos and miracle. The baby's shrill cry cut the icy air conditioning of the room, a primal sound of life that made my heart stop and restart in a new rhythm. The doctor placed the boy, wet and warm, directly on Elena's chest, and the world stopped. I saw her face transform, pain disappearing to give way to absolute adoration, and I cried copiously, resting my forehead on hers, our tears mixing on the newborn skin. That baby, with his swollen eyes and clenched fists, didn't have the mark of betrayal or the past. He was pure innocence, a blank canvas where we would write our love story. I cut the umbilical cord with trembling hands, separating him physically from his mother so he could start his individual journey, but knowing the emotional bond between the three of us was indestructible. When I held that tiny being in my arms for the first time, I felt weight and responsibility anchoring me to the ground. He was small, fragile, and depended entirely on us. I looked at Elena, exhausted but radiant in bed, and knew I would never love anyone as much as I loved those two people. Hayden entered briefly later, looked at his son with a mix of distant pride and strangeness, but soon left, realizing he was a tourist in a land where we were natives. We were alone again in the recovery room, baby sleeping in the acrylic crib beside the bed. The silence was now of peace and completeness. Elena reached out to me, and I held her hand, kissing her knuckles. We didn't need words. Her look said everything. We had done it. We had crossed the fire and come out the other side with a treasure in our arms. That boy wasn't my brother's son. He was our son, fruit of our resilient and brave love. And there, under the weak light of the hospital lamp, our family was officially inaugurated. The 18 months following the birth passed at breakneck speed, transforming my formerly silent and organized bachelor apartment into a colorful, vibrant chaos of toys, laughter, and baby powder scent. That space, which once housed only my solitary reading and my plants, was now the absolute kingdom of our son, a boy with almond eyes and insatiable curiosity who had conquered every inch of the wooden floor with his clumsy, determined steps. I caught myself smiling alone, tripping over building blocks scattered in the living room, or finding plastic cars hidden inside my work shoes, small daily reminders that life had become infinitely sweeter and messier. The exhausting routine of diapers, bottles, and sleepless nights didn't drive us apart. On the contrary, it acted as superglue, fusing our identities into an indivisible parental unit. Elena blossomed in motherhood in a way that left me breathless. The fragile, insecure woman I rescued from that hotel party had completely disappeared, replaced by a lioness mother, self-assured and radiant. Watching her interaction with the baby was like watching a dance choreographed by nature itself. She had infinite patience and sweetness that calmed any crying in seconds. But what moved me most wasn't just seeing her as a mother, but how she validated me in that role every instant. For our son, there was no biological distinction or hierarchy. We were just Mama Harper and Mama Elle, two equal sources of love, safety, and food. The first time he called me Mom, mumbling syllables with his little bird voice, I felt my heart expand until it almost burst my ribs. Our domestic dynamic worked like a Swiss watch powered by affection. While Elena took care of the more playful and educational part, filling the house with music and stories, I took on logistics and protection, ensuring nothing was missing in that nest. I loved coming home from work and being greeted by the duo at the door, with the little one running to hug my legs and Elena waiting for me with that knowing smile and a kiss that, even if quick, carried the promise of passion for when the baby slept. That welcome kiss was my fuel, certainty that, despite tiredness and dark circles, the flame between us remained lit, just waiting for the right moments to burn full force. The Hayden issue had settled into bureaucratic, distant normality that suited us perfectly. He paid child support religiously and saw his son in monitored, short fortnightly visits, acting more like a distant, polite uncle than a present father. He seemed to have accepted, with silent resignation, that the family spot was already taken, and he was just a guest in his own son's life. Elena held no visible grudges, treating him with cold, efficient politeness, but I saw relief in her shoulders every time he left and the door closed, leaving just the three of us in the safe comfort of our home. On that specific Saturday, morning light entered golden through the balcony, illuminating the scene that became my favorite in the world. Elena sitting on the fluffy rug, wearing only my t-shirt and panties, building a block castle with our son. The light highlighted the soft curve of her neck and the firmness of her legs, and I, watching from the kitchen with a coffee cup in hand, was invaded by a wave of desire and gratitude. She looked up, feeling my gaze, and smiled with subtle malice, winking at me. That simple gesture was a reminder that beneath the dedicated mother still lived the passionate, sensual woman who turned my world upside down in that hotel bathroom. I approached them, sitting on the floor and joining the game, but my hand found Elena's waist, squeezing soft skin with possessive affection. She leaned back, resting her weight on me, and whispered, "We needed time just for us, away from cocomelon and fruit purees." She told me, voice low so the baby wouldn't notice the conspiracy, that my mother, who ended up becoming our greatest ally after the initial shock, had offered to keep her grandson the following weekend. The proposal hung in the air, electric and tempting. 48 hours of absolute freedom to rediscover Harper and Elena the lovers, without interruptions. I looked at her, at lips I knew so well, and accepted the proposal with a long kiss on her shoulder, feeling anxiety grow in my stomach. Family life was wonderful, yes, but the woman inside me clamored for the exclusive attention of that dark-haired goddess. The block castle fell with our son's laughter, but we kept looking at each other, already mentally planning every second of that future weekend where the only rule would be pleasure. The routine was established and safe, but passion was about to claim its rightful space. Friday arrived bringing the usual fortnightly visit from Hayden, an event that at the start of our journey caused tension and anxiety, but which had now become just another appointment on our unconventional family agenda. When the doorbell rang punctually at 6, I didn't feel that old tightening in my stomach, only the calm resignation of someone who knows exactly their place and value. I opened the door and faced the face that was a biological mirror of mine, but which now seemed to carry marks of tiredness and loneliness I fortunately did not know. My brother had matured, it's true. Juvenile arrogance and the cheap conqueror shine had been replaced by a more sober, respectful posture, the stance of a man who knows he made the biggest mistake of his life and now lives on crumbs of what could have been a banquet. He entered the living room with a shy smile, bringing a clumsily wrapped gift for his son, always keeping a respectful physical distance from Elena, as if she were a piece of art in a museum, allowed to look, forbidden to touch. The dynamic between them was cordial and cold, polished like marble. Elena greeted him politely, reported news about the baby's health or diet, but her eyes never shone for him the way they shone for me. I watched the scene from the kitchen door, seeing my twin brother try to interact with the boy who had his eyes, but who sought refuge in Elena's legs with every sharper movement. It was visible that, for our son, Hayden was a fun visitor, a cool uncle who appeared occasionally, but not the figure of daily safety and love we both represented. There was a moment, while the boy proudly showed an abstract drawing made with crayons, when Hayden looked up and saw Elena's hand rest gently on my back while I served him coffee. I saw raw pain pass through his eyes, bitter recognition that that domestic intimacy, that comfort of belonging to someone, was something he had thrown away on a whim. He said nothing, just lowered his head and took a sip of coffee, swallowing along with the hot drink the reality that he was the external element in that perfect family equation. I didn't feel pity nor triumph. I felt only unshakable certainty that fate had corrected roots the right way. His presence there wasn't a threat. It was constant validation that I was the right choice for her. Conversation flowed to practical matters about the school the boy would attend next year and child support adjustments, subjects we handled with the efficiency of partners in a successful venture. Hayden praised his son's upbringing, admitting with rare humility that we were doing an exceptional job, much better than he could ever do alone. That admission was the definitive white flag, the end of any Cold War that might still exist between the twins. He knew I had assumed the post he vacated, and seemed finally grateful it was me, his sister, caring for his blood with such love. When he got up to leave, the mood in the house changed instantly, becoming lighter and breathable. He said goodbye to his son with a tight hug, promising to return in 2 weeks, and waved to both of us with a sad smile before the door closed, taking with him the heavy energy of the past. As soon as the lock turned, Elena let out a long sigh and turned to me, wrapping her arms around my neck and resting her forehead on mine. She whispered she was proud of our family, and that nothing in the world paid for the peace we had built between those 4 walls. I kissed her slowly, tasting victory and quiet love, and reminded her that the hard part of the week was over. Now, with Hayden's paternal obligations fulfilled and the visit ended, the path was clear for our escape plan. My mother called confirming she would pick up her grandson early next morning, leaving us with an empty house and a whole weekend of possibilities ahead. We looked at the living room cluttered with toys and smiled with malice, knowing that in a few hours, that scene of childhood innocence would give way to our sanctuary of adult passion. Hayden was the past, the distant biological father. We were the vibrant present, and we were ready to celebrate that in the best way possible. Saturday morning began with a different bustle, marked by the boisterous arrival of my mother, who entered the apartment like an anxious grandmother hurricane, ready to kidnap her grandson. Between smacking kisses, recommendations about nap times, and handing over a small suitcase with toddler clothes, the house was emptied of its habitual childish energy. When the door closed behind them, taking the laughter and noise of toys, A sudden, dense silence took over the environment. It wasn't the sad silence of loneliness, but silence charged with electricity and promise, the sound of space being opened so another facet of our lives could breathe. Elena and I stood in the middle of the living room, hearing the refrigerator hum and the sound of our own breathing, looking at each other with a complicit smile that slowly widened, like someone who just won the lottery without buying a ticket. The first thing we did was demother the environment, storing toy baskets in the baby's room and closing the door, creating a physical barrier between our parental routine and our lover's weekend. I went to the stereo and put on a smooth, sensual jazz playlist, replacing the repetitive nursery rhymes that used to be the soundtrack of our days. Music filled the room, changing the air's vibration, making it denser and more sophisticated. Meanwhile, Elena ran to the bathroom, announcing she would take a long, uninterrupted bath, a luxury she rarely allowed herself. I used this time to set the scene, adjusting lighting to a golden twilight, lighting vanilla-scented candles, and opening a bottle of red wine I was saving for a special occasion. I went to the kitchen to prepare something light for us to nibble on, but my mind was entirely focused on the woman getting ready in the next room. I felt adolescent anxiety, delicious butterflies in my stomach, as if it were our first date again, not the 1,000th day of a shared life. I wanted to impress her, wanted her to feel the most desired woman in the world, not just the efficient mother managing our home. I cut cheeses and fruits with care, arranging everything on a beautiful wooden board, and took it to the living room coffee table, turning the rug where we played with blocks into a romantic night picnic. When Elena finally appeared in the hallway, I lost my breath and almost dropped the glass I was holding. She had swapped practical cotton clothes for a wine-colored silk robe, which slipped over her body like liquid water, marking curves motherhood had made fuller and more voluptuous. Black hair was loose and damp, smelling of the shampoo I loved so much, and her skin shone with scented oils. She wore no makeup, and didn't need to. The shine in her eyes and natural blush on her cheeks were enough ornaments to bring me to my knees. She walked toward me with feline confidence, bare feet sinking into the rug, aware of the devastating effect she had on me. She sat next to me on the sofa, keeping no safe distance, gluing her leg to mine, and taking the wine glass from my hand to take a generous sip. Her smell invaded my nostrils, an intoxicating mix of fresh bath, floral perfume, and damned desire pheromones. She looked at me over the rim of the glass, honey eyes darkened by twilight and intention, and whispered she missed being just my girlfriend, being the woman I desired without worries about diapers or night crying. I replied, touching her face, sliding my thumb over her soft lower lip, saying she never stopped being that woman to me. Not for a second. Conversation flowed easily, but loaded with double meaning. Every word a preliminary touch, every laugh an invitation to get closer. We drank the wine slowly, savoring the freedom of having no time to wake up, letting alcohol warm our blood and loosen the last ties of responsibility. I praised her beauty, detailing how motherhood had made her even more interesting, transforming girl fragility into woman power. Elena absorbed my compliments like a flower absorbs rain, tilting her head back and exposing her long, elegant neck, a silent offer I couldn't refuse. I leaned in and kissed her neck, feeling the accelerated pulse under fine skin, and she let out a low moan vibrating in my chest, lighting the fuse of the dynamite we carried. My hands, large and firm, found her waist over the silk, squeezing possessively, reminding her body who owned that touch. She turned to me, dropping the glass on the table without looking, and held my face with both hands, kissing me with ravenous hunger sweeping away any remnant of rationality. It wasn't a good morning or see you later kiss. It was a kiss of claim, of pure, concentrated passion. There, on the living room sofa, we began to undo layers of mothers to rediscover lovers. The touch of silk against my skin, the heat of her body, the sound of ragged breathing, everything converged to create a perfect moment of reconnection. I felt we were about to live one of the most intense nights of our lives, a physical celebration of everything we had overcome to be there. Elena whispered my name against my mouth, asking me to take her to bed, and I, obedient and eager, picked her up, ignoring the weight and focusing only on the prize in my arms. The bedroom awaited us, and the night was young, but we definitely were not. We entered the bedroom with the urgency of someone about to miss a flight to paradise, stumbling slightly on the rug and laughing like two teenagers skipping class to make out. I kicked the door shut gently, leaving the hallway and the rest of the world outside, isolating us in that space smelling of lavender and us. The bed, usually shared with plush toys or invaded by a baby in difficult dawns, now looked like a vast, inviting ocean. Egyptian cotton sheets stretched like a blank canvas, waiting to be painted by our passion. Elena undid the silk robe belt, letting the fabric slide off her shoulders to the floor in a fluid motion that seemed choreographed, revealing skin I knew so well, but which in that golden candlelight looked new and mysterious. I lost words. My throat went dry. And the only thing I could do was admire the woman life, in its twisted, ironic lines, had gifted me. She lay in the center of the bed, black hair spread on the white pillow creating a visual contrast that always fascinated me, and extended her hand to me, fingers curling in a silent, imperative invitation. I undressed quickly, without the ceremony or shame I used to have of my robust body, for Elena's gaze on me was a mirror reflecting only beauty and desire. I lay over her, feeling the delicious shock of skin against skin, her heat radiating to my chest, fusing us into one temperature. The kiss that followed was deep, slow, and tasting of red wine and kept promises, a mute dialogue where tongues and lips reaffirmed the eternal love pact we signed the day she got pregnant. Intimacy that night had a different texture, richer and more complex than in our first days of forbidden romance. It wasn't just discovery of the new, but deep recognition of every curve, every sigh, every sensitive point we mapped over nearly 2 years of intense coexistence. My hands roamed her body with the security of someone walking through their own house in the dark, touching subtle marks of motherhood with reverence, kissing the tiny scar or softer skin of her belly as if they were medals of honor from our one war. Elena responded with absolute surrender, arching her back and digging nails into my shoulders, whispering disconnected things sounding like the most perfect music I'd ever heard. There was accumulated hunger in those touches, a need to recover time donated to our son, to remind the body that before being mothers, we were voracious lovers. I loved her with calm and fury, alternating between the tenderness of a caregiver and the passion of a possessor, wanting to engrave in her cellular memory that she was mine, entirely mine. The room became saturated with the sound of our accelerated breathing and muffled moans, a private symphony celebrating our physical and spiritual connection. In that moment, Hayden, family, society, and its judgments weren't even cosmic dust. The entire universe boiled down to that mattress and the movement of our hips. When the climax arrived, it was like a summer storm, intense and overwhelming, leaving us trembling and clinging to each other like castaways on the beach. I collapsed beside her, hiding my face in the curve of her neck, smelling sweat and perfume, the aroma of raw, wonderful reality. We lay there in silence for a long time, just feeling the pulse slow down, hearing wind beat on the closed window, enjoying that post-storm peace only true love can provide. Elena ran fingers through my damp hair, drawing invisible patterns on my nape, a gesture of affection that made me close my eyes and mentally thank for everything. I turned to look at her and found honey eyes shining with tears of emotion, a mirror of my own overflowing soul. She smiled, a tired, radiant smile, and said she loved me more than yesterday and less than tomorrow, a cliché phrase that in her mouth sounded like a sacred prophecy. I kissed her forehead, then tip of her nose, and finally mouth, sealing that moment with the softness of someone handling a rare jewel. We started talking softly about life, laughing at fate's ironies, remembering how it all started with a tragedy in a hotel bathroom and turned into that domestic, perfect romantic comedy. My brother's betrayal, which at the time seemed like the end of the world, now revealed itself as the necessary catalyst for our happiness, the grotesque mistake that pushed us to the sublime right choice. If he hadn't been so blind and selfish, I never would have had the courage to cross the line, never would have discovered the strength existing in me to protect and love Elena. It was a strange, almost perverse conclusion, but inevitable. We owed our family to his stupidity. This realization made us laugh. A light, liberating laugh dissipating any remnant of shadow that might still exist over our past. Dawn advanced and exhaustion began to weigh on eyelids, but we resisted sleep, wanting to prolong that feeling of fullness as much as possible. We planned Sunday, deciding we'd sleep late, order breakfast in bed, and maybe pick up our son a little early because deep down, missing that little hurricane was already kicking in. It was proof our life was exactly where it should be. Balance between lover passion and devoted mother love. We didn't need constant escapes. Our routine was the place we wanted to be. Elena nestled in my chest, her favorite sleeping position, and I wrapped her body with my arm and leg, creating our classic protective shell. I felt her breathing become deeper and rhythmic, the sign she was surrendering to dreams, safe and loved in my arms. I stayed awake a few more minutes, watching shadows dance on the ceiling, feeling immense gratitude inflate my chest. I was no longer the invisible twin sister or spinster aunt. I was the protagonist of my own story, the woman who won the love of her life and built a family with her own hands. I looked at the discreet ring we wore, a symbol we bought together on a random Tuesday afternoon, and kissed the cold metal, making a silent vow to keep making her happy every day. The future stretched ahead like an open, sunny road, full of challenges, yes, but also filled with laughter, our son's firsts, and nights of love like that one. I closed my eyes, finally allowing sleep to come, with absolute certainty that no matter what happened out there, in here, we had won. And so, we slept, intertwined and complete, living our happy ending, which, in truth, was just a new and wonderful beginning. Thanks for following this story of love, overcoming, and family. If you were moved by Harper and Elena's journey, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. Your interaction allows us to tell more stories like this one. See you next time.